Good morning and welcome to our webinar this morning. My name is Kerry Hayes. I'm the editor of Tourism Update, and we are extremely fortunate to be in studio today with the CEO of SA Tourism, Sisa Ntshona. Welcome, Sisa.
Thank you. How are you guys doing?
Excellent. I mean, it's been such a great year, hasn't it? We've had so much happening.
Yeah.
And I mean, tell us about 2018.
Absolutely. Great to be back here. And, it's always good to interact, with the trade and with the tourism space. Always good just to make sure that everyone's abreast with all the developments that are there. And also just to kind of give a bit of a status update as to where we're at. So I'll probably spend the next 15 minutes just kind of give you a bit of a sense of 2018, the year that was, and 3 weeks we have left of it. And also probably take some time to look forward into 2019, what our expectations are and any new developments in that space. So if I look back then at 2018, wow, what a year. I think we often forget that, we had a new president in this year, President Ramaphosa, and in his very iconic, very first State of the Nation address, you went at length about tourism and really challenged us as an industry to double the number of jobs in tourism. And from our side, we translate that into growth. You grow the space and the tourism numbers grow as well in terms of the jobs created. Key three things that he spoke about there: double the number of jobs, remove obstacles or barriers that are there, increase marketing investment, and more importantly, include new players in, as part of the inclusive growth strategy as well. I think also as well, major event this year as well is that we had our old new minister back again, right? I think we'll forget about that one as well. Minister Derek Hanukum came back as a Minister of Tourism, and that again just gives some nice momentum as to where we're at. Some other key developments there is the Tourism Business Council of South Africa has a new board, a new chairman, as it were, and congratulations to Mr. Blackie Komani, and a new CEO as well, Chief Ewa. Congratulations to both of them. You get a sense that TBCSA is waking up again and really being rejuvenated, and I look forward to really walking this path with them, and we can deliver on our dual objectives there. Even us at SA Tourism, we've got a new board. Okay, again, just give you a sense of what all these changes are at SA Tourism, and I also want to say welcome to all the new board members of South African Tourism. Good spread of industry representative around the table, so to make sure that the industry voice is not lost as well.
And new blood coming in.
Absolutely.
New ideas.
New perspective and everything else. Great there, right? Also, this year has been really significant and important for us, South Africa. It was Nelson Mandela centenary, and it gave us an opportunity to really bring the spotlight back into the country. It was never just one event, but a whole sequence of events, the celebration, the acknowledgement as well. And, we did a bit of a take on it as tourism to say, let's come up with 100 destinations that tell a Mandela story within it and really stimulate tourism, basically the back of that one. And the back of that, let me just spend a little moment to talk about our performance year to year in 2018 as South African Tourism. You'd know that last year we started the whole 5 and 5 target. 5 million more tourists in 5 years' time. We are now at the end of the second year of that one. It's always great to take stock as to how we do on that one. Our target for the year is 10.9 million tourists. I'd love to hit the 11 million, but 10.9. We're more likely to probably get about 10.5 million arrivals. Give a bit of a sense year to date thus far, and I'm talking year to date probably about till end of September. September, October numbers will coming through. We're 2% up year on year.
It's great.
Yeah, it's great. I think we could do more. How I like to look at growth, I compare myself with two numbers essentially. One is how is global tourism growing? If we're growing at less than the global numbers, it means someone is eating our lunch, and therefore we have to literally pull up our socks. The second one is how we're growing relative to our 5 and 5 targets, and that's what we've given ourselves for the next 5 years. Give you a bit of a sense in terms of geographically where we see the growth. The continent is growing at 3.1% year on year, which is a good recovery from last year, and that's where, by the way, a bulk of our arrivals comes through. Europe is a bit under pressure, unfortunately. I look at the UK, 4% down, France, 3% down, Netherlands, 2.5% down. Overall, Europe is 2% down essentially, right? And I mean, they account for about 1 million and a bit, 1.2 probably million arrivals a year. A concerning part for us, and there's a couple of factors I'll go into about detail that are impacting us there. We go across to America, North America, grew 1.3%. US is really coming up quite nicely. Canada is also picking up its socks, so happy on that front there as well. South America has been probably our star of the year as well, where we're seeing 48% growth, from the likes of Argentina and Brazil. Sure, off a low base, but essentially we'll take whatever contribution that we get from that side. Asia, unfortunately, is still under pressure, with the key markets being China and India literally being down, with 2.7% down on that one year on year. And that is starting to give us some headaches. I know a lot of people have been talking about the China market, the India market, but there's a couple of barriers that I'll address a bit later on that I think we need to really address fundamentally, and I think we can unlock a whole lot of growth from that side. The forward bookings, literally looking at airline bookings for the next 4 months that have been confirmed. Again, a bit sluggish a bit, but I think with the last couple of months push, we can get some fantastic figures start to come through on that side. Then, not to forget our very important local market, domestic. Domestic has been under pressure. Again, look at this year, technical recession, high fuel prices. Well, until last week, we got a bit of a reprieve. Really, really under pressure. The South African consumer has been really under pressure. We did an exercise where we looked at the population of the country, 55 million people. And then we actually wilted it down to see how many people can actually afford to travel domestically. And we did just a question number to look at those that are earning 5,000 and above, right? 5,000 per month and above. And we actually end up at a pool of 3.2 million South Africans. That just goes to show you how small that segment is. And, and how two things are important. One is to keep them traveling, but B is to grow the pool. And that's a factor of the economy and all the other facets that are there. September was a good month, by the way, for our arrivals. We had that travel week, and there was a great uptake on that side. And I want to share some statistics later on in terms of some of the numbers, number of hits and everything else there. And it really put the spotlight on tourism, basically, for that particular month. What also is important for us is our trade platforms. Indaba, I'm hearing some great feedback about how the energy and spirit is coming back in Indaba. And we've seen with our inquiries, really, really thank you to everyone who's participating in it. And this year we started much earlier, and already we are much ahead relative to last year in terms of bookings, in terms of people coming through. So I want to encourage those that haven't, come and stake your claim, find your space within Indaba, and it's really, really going to be a big, big push for us. And remember, it's no longer just about South Africa, but it's about the continent, showcasing our abilities, our competencies as a country, as a continent, to be able to host both leisure and business tourism as well. Also, we've also had the privilege of really selecting, key businesses, DMCs, tour operators, to really come and, present their capabilities as well, on international platforms like WTM London, ITBs. Again, I mean, at some point in time, we thought all the trade platforms were really going backwards. They're just picking up. The buzz at WTM London was just simply fantastic. And again, you can just see the sense of enthusiasm really coming back, to the market there. Then, because we're essentially a long-haul destination, it becomes important that airline connectivity is key. And South African Tourism has been a partner in all of the provinces as part of the airline strategy. Key notable ones is the Western Cape, which has really seen some great new arrivals, new planes landing on that side, planes increasing the frequency into Cape Town, and that's great. Absolutely, the Cathay Pacifics of this world, really, as Rwandan Air also increases frequency on that side. And, great to be part of a success story of the team coming through there. Gauteng as well, also some success stories. Alitalia now flying back here. Rome, Johannesburg is important. And again, part of the significance of the team driving that side. Durban, we saw BA now flying Heathrow to King Shaka. Great. Another alternative entry point to the country. Awesome for tourism and trade, by the way. So it's not just the top part of the plane, but the belly as well becomes important, and make sure that we bring as much trade into the country. The next level of conversation that we're having is around domestic. And the domestic one is where we're looking at frequency, where we're looking at even pricing, because part of the feedback we get on our domestic survey is that it's expensive to move around. And, SA is not doing us any favors, by the way, with all the stuff that's going on that side there. SA Express also didn't do us any favors, so you found that now frequencies to places like Kimberley really under pressure because, SA Express was really flying to those places. But I'm glad they're back online, and we really want to make sure that, we can get the domestic market stimulated. I mean, CFA, I must say, are doing a great job, Flyer CFA that is, in really coming up with dynamic pricing, regular frequencies, and really something to connect the country from their perspective there. I spoke about barriers, or rather threats. When you look at the numbers, if you look at the performance of the year, we can't run away from the impact that the water crisis had on the country. It was only in January, February, remember, at the beginning of this year, where the images of Armageddon were shown around the world, where images of long queues, literally the army standing next to taps, in cases of civil war, really being shown around the world. And those were damaging, to the extent that we are still recovering as a country, around the water issues. I think key there was important, to tell our story. But unfortunately, when there's a drought, it makes front page news. Now that the dams are 70% full, it doesn't quite make the front page news. So it's important then that we start to confirm and start to talk to the world about, we are open for business. And, the water crisis didn't just affect Cape Town. It affected the entire country. In fact, it affected SADC region. I was speaking to my counterpart in Botswana. He says, hey, our numbers went down because, simply put, people just pay up Cape Town visits together with probably, to Botswana, and the numbers were down from their perspective there. So there's a really big campaign, a big push around letting the world know that there is water back here. The other threat, calling the big four threats that we have as a country, one is water, definitely. Second one is wildlife, right? Perceptually around the world, you don't want to gain a reputation as the country that is on the wrong side, and the wrong moral side, by the way. The legal side is one thing, the wrong moral side around wildlife, interaction, and everything else in that regard. And I'm at pains to work with industry through TBCS and to saying, let's come up with industry-led guidelines as to how we'll interact on that side. And I want to iterate this one. The solution, the way I see it, is not going to come from government proclaiming another law, etc., etc. Not in the short term, at least, right? In the short term, I think we've got to take a responsibility together with the industry and says, how do you want to be seen around the world? What are the guidelines we're going to put in place? And then really, how are we going to be perceived internationally? It's also important as a body like SA Tourism to hear everybody and to listen and to learn and ultimately get to a space where we can make informed decisions. Safety and security still becomes top of mind issue around the country, especially to the Chinese market. The issues there keep on coming up all the time around safety and security, crime incidents, and this is where I often look and say, well, perception becomes reality in the world that we live in. Yes, sure, we do have crime issues, but so does the rest of the world, as an example. And I like to look at what's happening in Paris right now, right? Where literally the city's burning, cars are being thrown over because of protests against fuel prices. But however, the treatment is fundamentally different. Key issue for me here to say, well, we are where we're at. Let's deal with it. Let's take a position as a country and make sure that we become very proactive in terms of making sure our tourists feel safe. And, incidents like was about 2 weeks back at the Global Festival just don't help our cause, unfortunately. As much as it was a global show shown in 108 countries around the world, the focus just became on the negative aspects afterwards, and we've got to clean up our act from that perspective. And then the last one becomes, and it's getting less, by the way, the expropriation without compensation. It was more really prevalent coming from the Australian market, looking at the Conventions Bureau and making sure that we get our act together on that side. And I think government is doing a great job in informing and really stating how government is going to be approaching these, and not to have a pandemonium type of environment there. Visas, I know this always becomes a topical issue, and we've had a whole string of visa reforms, I'll put it that way, right from visa waivers, where it was Russia and Angola at the time, and believe me, in Russia we saw 53% growth, just from the back of the visa waivers, and Angola 48% growth in the back of the visa waivers. We saw Home Affairs also come up with a list of countries that have also been, afforded visa waiver. And I know some of the feedback from the trade is that it's a bit underwhelming, number one. Number two is that how was the country selection done in terms of which countries to choose from? And I always get, Georgia and Bolivia don't exactly, inspire, or rather give us a lot of numbers in terms of arrivals. We could have looked at other areas. But, my view is that it's incremental change, and I accept it. And at the back of that, we start to grow it more and more. And I think that's important. Unabridged certificates, we also the announcements last week, basically around those announcements, key, significant, because South Africa is a family country, I call it, where people come and experience it, as a family unit. So from countries that require visas to come here, you don't need to have unabridged certificate. And even in countries that have got visa waivers, an example, you don't need unabridged certificates. However, as I said, the Home Affairs officials do reserve the right, should they be suspicious, by the way, which is in line globally, they're able to ask for more documentation support just to make sure that everything is fine on that side. So, that one should go down quite well from the perspective there. Then looking forward into 2019, what do we have on the table there? The team is doing some great work around making our points of entry, our border posts, a lot more welcoming, right? Everything from the international airports that you arrive in, right from when the airport opens its door, the airplane opens its doors, those air bridges, do you feel welcome? Do you feel you're landing into South Africa, as an example, all the way out to our border posts, not next week actually, on Wednesday or Thursday, I'm going to Beitbridge, right? And again, there we've done some work around the border posts there to make it welcoming, to make it a bit more user-friendly. And it's important that we look at all ports of entry as to people coming to the country. So there's some work done on that side there. And this is WTM, by the way, when I listen to conversations that world tourism bodies are having. Last year was all about over-tourism. This year is about data. It's about information. It's about insights. It's about, big data and how with better informed, kind of information, we can all make better investment decisions. The exciting part for me is that what it could mean, for tour operators, for the trade in this country. We last week launched internally to our staff what we call our dashboard. And what it is basically just a series of information that gives everyone our arrivals, which countries are arriving from, and some insights. Hopefully to lead to ultimately that even the mom and pop tour operator, DMC, can make informed decisions about where the growth is going to come from. And this is in part to make sure that we start to have this use of technology, it being an enabler. Next year as well, we're also going to be launching our tourism arrival app as well, tourism app, and that will also give a sense in terms of calendar of events across the country, a whole lot of issues. And I can't give you too much information now, but think of it this way: it's almost like a bespoke travel agent in your pocket, and you're able to do so much. And this will also be available to the industry as well, around innovation, a guide for the industry and everything else there. Then the last two things I want to talk about is the Conventions Bureau. The MICE market is important to us and it's part of tourism, meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. The team there doing some fantastic work. There's some nice pipeline of big conferences that are coming through in the next 3 to 5 years. I think the biggest one so far is the World Ophthalmology Society. That's 19,000 members that are going to be descending down in the country for a period of 5 days. And you can imagine the knock-on effects that will have with this. So we're always trying to target more. I call it our bulk acquisition strategy, where we always get more there. And their theme, by the way, that's also going to be launched in the new year is Meet Here, Grow Anywhere. And kind of really inviting the world to come have the conferences in the country, not only do great support, service, and everything else, but it also has a much more meaningful impact on that side. The grading team, is also going to be getting a bit of a boost of energy next year as well, where they'll be launching the new revised accolades. This has been an interesting space, with the advent of the trip advisors and the Airbnbs. Many have always questioned, does grading still have relevance and where does it fit and everything else there? And the resounding answer is yes, it really does. It may not be seen so much in the big established players who've got big brand names, but a small B&B who just does not have the brand equity that a big name does, having the stamp of approval, validation by the country authorities really gives them a sense of leg ups there. And we're talking everything, including homestays, as an example, which is part of the inclusive growth strategy that we're driving on that side. Our view is to collaborate and align, So when you look at the likes of trip advisors, Airbnbs, we collaborate with these partners and say, how do we make sure we play together to bring the numbers that we come through on that side? And then my last one is the Lelizela Awards, the annual awards that are presented by the Minister of the Tourism space. We are always looking at refining the model and make sure that it becomes wider and more representative of the industry as well. So there's some work we're going to be doing over there. I've been speaking quite a lot to TBCSA and say, hey, let's both co-own this thing and let's both make it and make sure that it represents the industry in its entirety. Nothing ever stands still, and we always got to be evolving and coming through on that side. So in summary, we are slightly behind our 5 and 5 goals. I'm hopeful for 2019. It's as if 2018 was almost like a recovery year. We're really getting momentum and steam to really launch ourselves quite significantly into 2019. I'm still of the view that tourism can really play a much more wider role into South Africa's economy. Coordination amongst government itself, and make sure that, as we all know, that for tourism to happen, it's not just in one particular ministry. We need all of government to get together. I'm also encouraged, by the way, there are all the private sector that come through, where they're also saying, hey, we want to be part of this growth. We are this growth as well. And they're also putting a lot of steam behind it and in terms of delivery of the numbers. So all in all, 2018, a mixed year. It's been a tough year. It's been a long year. I think many people are looking at it like, oh, you look tired. And I'm like, I'm exhausted, right? But I think we're all gaining great momentum for 2019. And I really look forward to interacting a lot more with everybody and hold each other accountable. If you say you're going to do things, let's get them done. If not, we really got to come back and say, well, why not? What are we going to do differently and how are we going to land these things? And the tourism world globally is growing. I just want to make sure that South Africa starts to get its bigger market share, and 5 and 5 is part of that growth story that gets us into the spaces. So I look forward to interactions. I know that there's going to be some questions that will be asked, and let's pick them up as we go along. So that's my story for now.
Great, thank you, Sisa. I think for me, one of the most incredible things that I've seen this year is how all the tourism voices have started to come together, as you have said previously, speaking with that one unified voice, carrying everyone's concerns, everyone's ideas forward, and looking at the best way to implement that for the greater good of tourism.
Yeah, look, I think it's sometimes we need a crisis to really wake us up a little bit. And now I tell people that once the tourism numbers go down, everyone starts realizing actually that, wow, we need to be aligned, we need to speak the same language, and coordination becomes key. When people are canceling their bookings, they don't call the tourism authority. They call the trade, they call the hotel, they call the B&B. And we've got to make sure that we arm everyone with as much information as possible so that they can make informed decision, so that they can also drive a consistent narrative around A, we acknowledge there's a problem, but B, we're doing something about it. And where we're at the moment, by the way, is that we're teaching the world as to how to respond to water crisis issues. We all know what's happening down in Australia as an example at the moment. Sao Paulo's in a bit of trouble as well. Again, this is almost a new order as to responsible tourism and how South Africa must really, really hold the light up high and saying, well, let's teach the world as to how to coordinate and how to collaborate and come together. Then the growth position is key. So I look at all these platforms. I look at platforms like Lizella, and I look at platforms like Indaba. They can't just be about SA tourism going to a corner and coming up with something. I'm really trying to open those up and say, let's interact. What do you want to see? How do we make sure that this represents what the market needs? Because at the end of the day, I'm not the one with the till. It's actually the industry that's till gets drinking. And it's important to me that we look at our rivals as well, but we also look at our contribution to GDP. So the longer the tourists stay in the country, the more they spend, the better as well. An indicator that we watch quite closely is what we call geographic spread. We want to make sure our tourism numbers grow, but not just in the obvious nodes. We want to make sure that in other parts of the country, there is activity there. And my favorite town there being there are still, how do we drive traffic to that city and make sure that the impacts of tourism are felt across the board?
We really have so much to offer in our country. I mean, these hidden gems, not just towns, but attractions. There's these most incredible historical, cultureful things that the world is needing to see.
Absolutely. It's in how we tell our story. It's in how we shine the light on these hidden gems. Those are special. More and more research tells us that the modern day traveler is not just come to take pictures and walk away. They want immersive opportunities. They want to feel they're part of the locals. They want to feel they're making a difference as well. And I think these little hidden gems really gives an opportunity for some real authenticity in terms of delivering on the South Africa experience. And it's wide, it's diverse. My view has always been to say, well, the introduction of new players does not come at the cost of the existing players because the space is growing, right? But however, I want all of us to be conscious to saying, how do we bring more variety into our offering so that even the person who's coming here for the 5th time, 6th time, there's still new things to discover. Because if we're just going to be stuck on Kruger, Cape Town, Garden route, then I think we're selling ourselves short in terms of what this country has to offer.
And I think it was you who said at the Lizella Awards this year, which were amazing, by the way, and if we're going to see something better than that, wow, I said watch the space.
Sure.
But these new players that you say are coming in, and you said it in that briefing, come in with new ideas, with innovative offerings. Don't come in with the same that is already on the table. Bring something new, bring something different that is going to create an exciting landscape for our tourists coming to the country and the continent.
Absolutely. So it's in the smart use of events. If you look at our calendar events for the next 3 to 5 years, we don't have a big sporting spectacle like a World Cup, like some games and stuff like that. But how do we smartly use, things like the Rugby Sevens as an example, right? To shine the spotlight, yes, on the main attractions, but to pull people in, come for the wine as an example, but discover the rest of the country. And I think that's where the opportunity lies in terms of how the small players tactically can come and earn their slice of the business, not only just internationally, but also domestically as well. Regional tourism is also coming up quite nicely. We've got to look at those as our neighbors' economies start to pick up as well. They start to become trading partners and tourists for us, and that is important.
Great. I think let's move into some questions now.
Sure.
Please, I encourage you, there is a chat box. If you can just type your questions in there, we will have a look at answering as many as we can in the time that we have remaining. But we did have some questions that were sent through on email.
Sure.
We'll just go through those first. All right, Sisa, Anne Pierce is looking at how to connect and promote South African tourism to the Chinese travel market using the platforms that they work on, WeChat and Wallet, QR codes. So how can tourism stakeholders and product service providers work with SA Tourism to connect with DMCs, to operators abroad, to market what we have? Are there resources that they can tap into?
Sure. So a couple of responses. The first one is, again, it's about making our research, insights, information accessible to everybody. So whether you're looking at the Chinese market, the Indian market, Australian market, you should be able to find your joy within there. And I spoke about this dashboard that was launched internally last week. This is also going to be going externally. So definitely the trade will have access to it. And we're working together with TBCSA to make sure that we've got the relevant information at the relevant times, at the appropriate times as well. What we've also done is around accessibility. Really, our country managers are saying they are such a wealth of information because they know the conditions in country. To speak about the Chinese market specifically, Mansoor 2 weeks ago held a session in Cape Town, for about 3 hours with DMCs and tour operators, and he was there to talk about China. He wanted to talk about China from his experience. Again, anyone curious about those markets, you would want to invest the time and effort to sit with our country managers, get to know them a bit more so that you can start to get more information around those spaces. It is never us alone. It is us together with TBCSA, as I've said, which is the amalgamated body of all the tourism operators, and delivering this consistent drip feeding of appropriate or relevant information so that people can make more and better informed decisions.
Right. Andrea Adelbert, please forgive my pronunciation, is a national German-speaking tour guide who's been in the industry for many, many, many years. And his question is, he is very concerned that tour guides are being attacked for the monies that they are collecting while they are on tours from the guys that they are taking around, because criminals have cottoned on to the fact that the cash is being carried with them. These guys are busy, they're doing their job, they're doing their work, they don't have time to stop at a bank. Crime is a big issue. How are we going to look at dealing with crime? I know it's a big question, and it's not a single part that can deal with it.
It really, really hurts me and pains me every single time a crime incident happens within the tourism space, because it takes us back. It takes us back so far back. What we don't realize, it makes bigger news internationally than it does in this country. And we tend to move on. However, those foreign markets tend to really, really kind of personalize it. And again, the tourist has choices. They can make any decision to go to any market around the world. The more issues we put in front of them, the more difficult we make it for South Africa to be the choice. So if we're leading with safari as an example, guess what? Kenya also have safari. And if they don't have safety and security perception issues, people will go there, right? We've seen what's happening around the hub status around East Africa. Ethiopian Airways is now really becoming the new champion of connecting the continent. And if we're not careful as a country, we really will be literally not doing ourselves a disservice on that side. Now, whilst I don't have a specific response to this one, safety and security becomes important. Safety tourism monitors are things that have been being rolled out by the department right across the board, across the country. I'm not sure what the sequencing is, but just to make sure there's visibility. And then thirdly as well is that, again, I want to interact with TBCS and say what practically, what tactically can you do in the short term to curb this? And I'm always looking for suggestions, and please, let's see this as holding hands. So almost for every challenge you see, I also want to get suggestions and proposals that we can consider and say, wow, we can implement this, because I always believe the solutions are going to come from the bottom up. The people actually on the ground interacting over there, and let's do what needs to be required.
Excellent. Standing together and bringing that idea-based, generating it.
Absolutely.
Ralph Eckerman is asking, what is the strategy for Brand South Africa going forward? Brand positioning is at the heart of the strategy, so are we going to be re-looking at Brand SA, and who will we be looking at?
Okay. Interesting. First on, Brand SA is a different agency from us, but there's so much overlap between the two. What we haven't done succinctly is that South Africa does not have a tourism, but specifically bespoke tourism brand, right? What we have, if you look at our logos and everything else, you've got a South African with the words inspiring new ways, which is really a country positioning and does not really focus so much on tourism alone. There's debate within the organization board and even the ministry level to say, well, maybe it's time to make the case to actually have a specific tourism brand. Again, who we're competing with? Amazing Truly Asia, Visit Kenya, Visit Rwanda, and all those inspiring kind of tourism-specific branded names, you know. And I think we've matured enough now to get to those spaces. Unfortunately, it's not my call to make alone, because if it was, we'd have made a decision a long time ago. But I've got to go through the process to actually get ourselves there. Branding is important. Top of mind is important. We invest a lot of resources in what we call nearby to make sure that we are present in the eyes of the consumer in order for us to be able to be considered around the conversion curve there.
We received a question from a tourism industry player. Okay. When will South Africa adopt the whole of government approach to tourism as a comprehensive? For example, he mentions, or she mentions, the visa issue received a lot of attention while aviation is still getting very little, and how open skies could increase the numbers in SA.
Well, look, I mean, coordination amongst government I've spoken about is that it can never just be them alone that actually connects everyone together. It's got to be across the board. So whether Department of Transport, Safety and Security is one of them, it needs to make sure that we come across the board. The president is surely highlighting this, you know, through his many different kind of utterances around the importance of tourism. Our tourism minister, you would know, is very energetic and very vocal and very visible around this space. It's cohesion, it's bringing everyone together. That actually says we need to wean ourselves off extractive mining and also manufacturing, but also start to look at the services space to actually get our contribution up. Around the open skies, actually South Africa does have open skies. It's our counterparts on the continent that are not playing ball, because typically what would happen is you would limit your frequency the other counterpart allows. And I know South Africa, I mean, the whole Yamoussoukro Declaration was signed years ago, open skies reaffirmed as well, and again, it's a bilateral thing. If our counterparts in other countries were also to allow open skies, will also match that as an example. So that's something definitely she's looking at, and I know for a fact that most of open skies as a government country as well.
The big four threats that you mentioned was wildlife.
Sure.
So Bloodlines has submitted two questions actually. I'm just going to read the questions. only two for now.
Yeah.
Bloodlines has supported the strong statements SA Tourism and yourself have made against predator breeding and canned hunting over the last 18 months. They agree with your assessment that they are hurting Brand SA. Given this, when can we expect SA Tourism to start taking proactive measures to end these exploitative activities?
Okay.
A tough one.
Well, look, I mean, let's put it this way. Let's talk about facts at the moment. You know, the previous question asked about government coordination, interdepartmental. Well, the new Minister of Environmental Affairs, 2 weeks into her job, already announced that she's asking for submissions. So, you know, in terms of how the whole wildlife regime from a country level should be. So, again, I want to encourage every single one, people that are interested in the wildlife space, please contact Department of Environmental Affairs. Make your submissions, right? Make your submissions heard as well, so that it goes into the mixing pot in terms of ultimately South Africa's stance and policy and law in terms of wildlife interaction. Because when something is legal, according to our law, we can't do anything as I say tourism. The only thing we possibly do is to not to promote, but they're not acting illegally, right? So therefore, the tighter the rules, the more appropriate the rules become, the laws become. And to me, again, it's going to come from each and every single person who is an interested party within the tourism, and also the wider space, conservation, everything else. Contribute, make your voice heard. And a more coordinated voice, by the way, is a more powerful voice. And come up with solutions as well. It's one thing to say, well, I don't like what I see. Come up with proposals to say, well, if not like this, then how? And if I'm not sure on the timing of those submissions, but I know currently as we speak, they are open.
Excellent. And I think that answers Bloodline's second question as well. Thank you, Sisa.
Sure.
Right, let's move on to a few questions that you have submitted to us. Thank you very much. And again, please, if you have any questions for our CEO of SA Tourism, please do type them in the chat box and we will get to as many as we can.
So are these visible to everyone so they can also see questions? Okay, cool. Yeah, no problem.
Right, so Septi is asking for more details on the initiative you touched on, focusing on digitally connecting SME products around the country. Can you give us anything at this stage?
Yes and no, right? So yes, definitely we see technology as an enabler. We see technology as a leveler. How do I make a homestay in the rural part of Lusikisik in the Eastern Cape visible to a tourist in Germany who is actually looking for that authentic rural homestay? Technology is going to be the enabler of that one, and that becomes key. So the issue here is not only just on SMEs, but just on our products in the country in general, right? I think there isn't a single repository that people can go to see what is available. So as a result, we tend to default to the same names that we know. Technology is one of the space quite widely as well. There is a project that we're doing with the industry. It's called NTVIS. I'm sure they'll come up with a better names and acronym for something at the moment. And that's going to be part of the platform that we're going to be using in terms of using technology as an enabler. Even us at SA Tourism as well, we'll look at various innovation efforts that will come on stream. It will definitely come through in 2019. That I can guarantee. Probably Q2, in my view. We just need to test it and make sure that it works. And again, roll it out. What I must warn, and what is important, it's not good enough just to be an SME. You got to be an SME worthy of the consumer buying your service. So you got to make sure that you still deliver an awesome product, awesome quality, so at the appropriate price as well.
Septi's also asked, now that you're talking about SMEs, and I know that this is a very important market for SA Tourism, for the government. It was at the media briefing at Lelizela.
Sure.
So Septi's asking, in terms of the visa waivers, some of the countries may not be important to bigger players, but lucrative to SMEs. What is SA Tourism's thinking with positioning SMEs in those markets?
Absolutely. Very good question. Thank you, Seth. So I spoke earlier on about our trade platforms. And we are really looking in terms of the mix of trade that we take to these trade platforms, in 2019 space. So by that I mean, so if we've got 14 slots as an example, for WTM, whom are we taking? Why did we choose those ones? And what is it? So we want to make sure that we put our best foot forward as a country at those platforms, that we can actually showcase the various elements that we have around the country. Now, you also have your developing markets that are not quite there yet. And SMEs are an excellent opportunity for them to come through there because they are much more aggressive, in markets that are emerging, long established relationships. Because part of the challenge, by the way, is that if you look at your traditional markets, trying to penetrate some of those relationships becomes almost impossible. But in the developing markets, it's important that there are new players coming through and starting to position themselves. The caveat I'd like to throw in, however, is that I'd like to see more collaboration amongst SMEs so that combined you have capacity and you also have scope individually. And that is something that definitely, as I say, tourism, we can create the dance, right? But essentially, it's up to the partners or the attendants to actually start to align and work together from that perspective. So currently, SMEs, I see them as a very important tool in terms of igniting those new markets. So what you'll find is that, by the way, we'll have a mix. So in the new markets, we'll say, listen, 60% of the exhibitors will be SMEs because we know it's an emerging market. In the established market, we'll make it 30 or 40%. And make sure that mix comes through. With all that geographic spread, taking 10 businesses, but the exact same thing, and garden route. We want to see a mix from that. All of our provincial tourism bodies, and including also what's called local ones at city level, is that trade platforms are not for officials, right? The trade platforms are for trade, right? So a tourism body is not the one that's supposed to be on the fork about a province. The guys who actually do the transactions themselves and need the relationships are the trade. And we're going to be prioritizing the trade that represents the spread that we're looking at, that represents the mix that we're looking at, be the ones that actually go and seal deals. And we're going to be announcing these to the market early next year. Know what is the criteria in order to select businesses that actually go and exhibit on our trade platforms.
Right, we've got time for one more question before we wrap up. So, Sisa, what is the strategy around the international youth travel market? Youth is quite a big market, quite talked about at the moment. Sure. What are your thoughts?
You know, it's definitely, there's different specialist segments, and youth is one of them. But we've got to ask ourselves are the tourism players themselves, trade, are they representative of youth? The last thing you want, you're going to get an old geezer like me setting up a business, I'm targeting youth, but yet I have no perspective in terms of that. So therefore, how are we also promoting for youth-owned businesses to actually come and operate and be part of the play within the tourism space, so they can also target their counterparts across the world? How are we also, as businesses, also employing youth, young people into our organizations to make sure that they can understand and market to this millennium? So it's a two-way street. Remember, what we can do is we market, we create the promise, we create the demand, but the delivery is done by the industry. So it's a two-way street. And again, I'm always up to the challenge, right? If there is capable, willing, and able youth-focused entities out there, believe me, we'll include in our packages and make sure that we give you the airtime that is there. But I don't want to make a promise that I can't fulfill. And remember, the fulfillment is done by the trade. That's where the balance needs to come in.
Great, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our time, unfortunately. So, Sisa, I'd like to just give you the opportunity to say a last few words before we wrap up the webinar.
Oh, wow, we're really done. I was actually enjoying that. Look, I want to say thank you very much for the collaborative work that you really have done for the 2018 year. I want to say thank you to all the associations, to all the parties, to all the tourism players. It's been a tough year, but I liked how we all got together to move forward from the perspective. I interact a lot with you guys individually as well, and I must say the spirit that you're approaching this and the hunger that you have to grow this space becomes important. I want to encourage this going forward as well. And let me give you an example. A couple of the key players, as an example, gave me a call the other day and said, listen, we've noticed that in Indaba you have an area there for hidden gems. They said, listen, we'd like to bring a couple of hidden gems into our stands so they can be part and parcel of us, so they can see and observe and learn. That was not prompted, that's really coming from the industry. So listen, we want to be part of the solution. We want to make sure that new players feel welcome. We want to teach them, but let's bring them into our stands. I mean, that really made me grateful to kind of say, wow, I like it when I see that trade, that the solutions are really coming from the trade on that side. I know at sometimes it's frustrating that the wheels of government turn slowly, but I'm encouraged. We're starting to point to the right direction. we're starting to speak the same language around safety and security, around visas, around airline connectivity, and that becomes key as well. The team at SA Tourism, believe me, we're not sleeping. We are absolutely aligned, and we're really focused on those tourism numbers. We are really focused on making sure that we can deliver for the country, for yourselves, those numbers. And 2019, I'm really encouraged by what I see. I think we can do a bit better from our side, and a bit more sharper. You'll see a higher level of engagement from SA Tourism in terms of sharing information, statistics, data, information. And as I say, our technology play for 2019 is really going to be a great leveler that starts to include everyone else, and make sure that we all start to see the same picture, where the opportunities are at. Because, as business, the better informed you are, the better decisions you're able to make.
Amen to that. Sisa, thank you so much for joining us in studio today. As always, a privilege to talk to you, and thank you for those amazing insights that you shared with us.
Thank you again, and please, everyone, have a blessed Christmas. Have a busy December period and January, please. We need those numbers, and please be safe in everything that you do. And I really look forward to interacting with all of you in 2019. I'll be bumping into some of you in December, believe me. But thank you very much, and fantastic year for everybody.
Great, thank you. And thank you for joining us today. For all the questions that were not answered, we do have them noted down, and we will share them with Sisa and SA Tourism and get some of those answers back to you. If you did miss out on any part of the webinar, do not fear. We will be podcasting it later this afternoon. And yes, you can grab hold of the podcast there.
Can I just say something there? I'd like, so now I'm sitting 2 seconds. Could we also get some feedback from all of you? How frequently do you want this engagement? Do you want it in this format, in a different format, and everything else? I just want to gauge, in terms of, is once every week? Okay, it won't happen that way, but once every quarter, once every month. Just give us a sense in terms of how often you'd like to hear from us, and then also probably guide us. What else do you want to hear from us as well, so that we can make sure that it becomes a two-way street. Okay.
We will give you an email address that you can email that feedback to, and just up for that article on tourism updates at the end of the day. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to the next webinar. Happy festive season.